Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to give you this weekend's predictions for UFC Long Island, which is headlined by an interesting fight in the featherweight division between Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez. However, just before we get into those breakdowns, as always, there's going to be a Baze AI recap on our YouTube channel and the Baze AI playlist from the UFC prediction software from last week at UFC Vegas 58. Another good week as per usual. It's becoming the norm now with Baze AI. Not a great week from me, but a really great week from Baze AI. So make sure you check out that recap from last weekend. But with that said, let's get into the breakdowns because that's why you are all here. And like I said, a really good featherweight main event here between Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez. And I feel like it is a bit of a difficult fight to predict and be that confident in, but I think that the reason why it's difficult is because Yair Rodriguez, last time out against Max Holloway, a lot of people thought Holloway was literally going to run through him, potentially finish him, and Yair Rodriguez wouldn't be in the fight at all, but he was. And that's what makes this fight a little bit interesting because it does look like Yair Rodriguez has leveled up a little bit. However, on the other side, you've got Brian Ortega. And in Brian Ortega, you've got a BJJ phenom, a legitimate BJJ black belt, a good submission game. He's always had that. But as of lately, his striking, and as I say, as of lately, over the last couple of years, his striking's got so much better. He's now able to really hang with some of the top strikers in the division now. He wasn't able to hang with Alexander Volkanovski, but literally nobody can in the division. He wasn't able to hang with Max Holloway on the feet, but again, apart from Alexander Volkanovski, nobody can hang with Max Holloway on the feet. So I think that the true improvements of Brian Ortega's striking game has come in the Korean Zombie fight. I think that's the best fight to explain those developments. And in that fight, he just looked absolutely phenomenal. And against the Korean Zombie, who's always been a lifelong good striker himself. So with Brian Ortega, you've got, like I've said, a BJJ black belt, a phenom, a good submission game, and now a developed striker against Yair Rodriguez. Now, I think Yair Rodriguez is still going to have a very slight edge in the striking, but Brian Ortega's really big for the division. He's physical, he comes forward, and if you can get Yair Rodriguez on the back foot, I think Rodriguez does a much better job of striking moving forward. So I think if Ortega can bully Rodriguez and potentially just have him concerned at all times about getting the fight down to the mat, because if this fight does hit the mat, Ortega's going to run through him. I don't think Yair Rodriguez will be able to get a stand-up if Ortega's on top of him. So I think Yair Rodriguez is going to be hesitant from that perspective. That might make him a little more defensive. That'll allow Ortega to come forwards a little bit more, and that should enable Ortega to make this fight at least very close from a striking perspective. But I do think that takedowns are going to come in this fight. I do think Ortega is going to be able to get on top of Yair Rodriguez, and because of how big Ortega is physically, I think he's going to have the strength in his striking. And then with that submission game as well, what I'm trying to get at is he's definitely a finishing threat, and the finishing upside is with Ortega. And if it does go to the scorecards, again, if Ortega's got some decent top control time and he's been pushing Yair Rodriguez back quite a bit, then again, the judges are going to favour that. So tying everything together, I'm picking Brian Ortega to win this fight. And in the co-main event, we've got an interesting one. We've got Miesha Waterson versus Amanda Lemos. Amanda Lemos is, she was doing phenomenal against Andrade until unfortunately she got caught with the UFC's first ever standing arm triangle choke. And like I say, Andrade is a beast of a striker as well. So Lemos was definitely keeping up with her. And again, that should be a worry for Miesha Waterson here. Now, for Miesha Waterson, I feel like to win this fight, she's got to be able to get the fight down to the mat. She's got to get good positions on the mat. And she's got to be able to threaten with submissions, stay topside. Now, Miesha Waterson can strike. Her nickname's the Karate Hottie. She's got that striking background, but I just don't see her being able to go in there and strike well with Lemos, because Lemos will fire back. I don't think Miesha Waterson's going to have any sort of power that Lemos is going to be really concerned about, and because of that, Lemos will just match any aggression that Waterson comes with twice the aggression herself, twice the power, and twice the forward pressure. And I think it's going to be really difficult for Miesha Waterson on the feet. And that's why I think that she needs to get Lemos down to the mat. But then the problem that comes with that is Lemos is so physically big for the division. She's strong. It's going to be difficult for Waterson to really get that fight down, especially with a fighter like Waterson that does rely more often than not on those head and arm throws in regard, opposed to, traditional wrestling style takedowns like single legs and double legs. She's not going to be able to head and arm throw Lemos. And if she does, does, then I think Lemos will just get a better position once that fight hits the mat and, create the problems that come with the head and arm throws if it's not done correctly. So, like I said, I'm struggling to see the Michelle Waterson side. I don't think she's going to knock her out. I don't think she's going to be able to take her down and submit her, at least not take her down frequently in order to have those submission opportunities. And I don't think that she's going to be able to out-volume her. I think she's going to be on the back foot a lot. I think she's going to be getting hit hard a lot. I think Lemos has got the finishing upside as well. So it's just difficult for me to see Michelle Waterson winning this fight for that reason. I'm picking Amanda Lemos to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jingliang versus Muslim Salikhov. Now, this fight should be a back and forth striking war. It should be won and lost on the feet. If there is any wrestling, it's probably more likely going to be from Jingliang's side. But again, Muslim Salikhov's got decent takedown defense now. And if he does get taken down, I don't think Jingliang's got the heavy top pressure BJJ in order to keep Salikhov down for long periods of time as well. And I actually think it's going to be a really fun fight as well, because both fighters are ultra aggressive. Both fighters will throw heat. Both fighters have got no problems getting into it, wild exchanges on the feet. But in a striking fight, you always have to favour that striker that's got the background in striking. So that's with Muslim Salikhov. He's got hundreds of kickboxing fights. He's came into MMA known as a kickboxer. The king of Kung Fu, he's got good spin attacks, and you can tell he's a real solid kickboxing specimen as well, because the way he throws, or the speed he throws those spin kicks at, there's a real difference between a lifelong kickboxer and a fighter that's just a good kickboxer. And the lifelong kickboxers are really effortless and have super speed in regards to everything they throw with the kicks. So you can really see that from Muslim Salikhov. And I think that's going to be one of the problems for Jingliang, because I think Salikhov is going to be much quicker in this fight. I think his counters are going to be sharper. So when Jingliang's coming forward, I think Salikhov's going to be able to handle that pretty well. And ultimately, although Jingliang's going to have his moments, I just struggle to see him, unless he knocks Salikhov out, which, we haven't seen real evidence of Salikhov having any durability issues or anything like that. So obviously there is the puncher's chance, 4-ounce gloves, one punch lands in the right place, it can end the night. So unless Jingliang does knock Salikhov out, I think Salikhov's just going to be able to land the better quality shots. And I think Jingliang's going to try and apply more volume, but when he's coming forwards and trying to throw more volume, I think that Salikhov's going to be able to move and deal with that quite well and fire back with hard counters. That's going to start making Jingliang second guess himself coming forward, trying to apply a high volume game. If Jingliang can start getting high volume off on Salikhov, that's where he's going to have an edge, because Salikhov can be a little bit low on volume. But like I said, with how fast, sharp and powerful his counter-striking is, a high-volume striker like Jingliang, who does get hit quite a bit as well, is likely going to get hit coming into those sort of ranges, and getting hit a lot is going to start creating hesitancy and, like I said, second-guessing himself. So I think it's a good fight for Muslim Salikhov. I think it's a close fight, and I wouldn't be shocked if Jingliang won, but I do think that Muslim Salikhov, the caliber he's got in regards to his striking background, his kickboxing, his speed, his counters, his precision, his sharpness in his attacks as well, along with having that deceptive power, I'm picking Muslim Salikhov to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Schnell versus Sumudaerji, and I really like Sumudaerji. I think he's one of the best prospects in the flyweight division. I could potentially see him as a flyweight champion further down the line as well, once he's got a few more fights under his belt. But this dude's insanely good. He's tall, he's long, he's quick, he's sharp, he can fight in both stances. He can fight on the back foot as well as he can fight moving forwards. If you try and take him down, he will make you wait for the takedown. If you do get him down, he's got a decent BJJ game, he's a good scrambler, he can get back up to his feet. Stylistically, he's going to be very difficult for a lot of fighters in this division, and I think he's a dark horse in the division for sure. Like I said, tall, long, rangy, quick, good on the feet, slides in and out of range really well, high volume, deceptive power for a 125-pounder as well. Then you've got Schnell on the other side. Schnell's actually not a bad fighter himself. He's got a good striking game. He's really quick. I feel like this fight in moments is going to feel like we're watching it on fast forward, because Schnell's biggest asset is his speed. But because Sumudaerji is so quick himself, I feel like that speed's going to sort of nullify itself out here. I don't think that there is going to be a massive edge in speed on either side, and because of that, I think Schnell's going to have problems, because Schnell gets by in a lot of his fights by being the faster striker, so he can get there before his opponent. He can strike and land good volume on his opponent because he's much faster. But against an opponent he's not going to be much faster than, it's really difficult to see Schnell thriving in this fight from that striking perspective because of the speed. And then you've got the wrestling and the grappling of Schnell, which is definitely there. You know, he's got those capabilities. He's got takedowns in the UFC, but I just think that, again, for someone to really take Sumudaerji down and control them on the mat, then they're going to have to be at a certain level that I just don't think Schnell's at. And by certain level, I mean somebody like maybe Brandon Moreno, I could see taking Sumudaerji down and being able to control him topside, but I just don't think Matt Schnell's quite there. I think Sumudaerji's defensive wrestling is going to be on par, or if not better than Matt Schnell's offensive wrestling. And I think Sumudaerji's, again, his defensive BJJ is probably going to outweigh the offensive BJJ of Matt Schnell. So I think because of Sumudaerji's tall, because he's rangy, because he's quick, because he can switch stances, fight well moving forwards, fight well moving backwards, I just feel like it's going to pose a lot of problems for Matt Schnell, and he's going to have a lot of difficulty dealing with it throughout the fight. Because he's going to have a lot of difficulty with that, I think he's going to get hit quite a bit as well, whether he is being aggressive or whether he is on the back foot. And I also think that Sumudaerji, with that deceptive power, could potentially crack Matt Schnell and knock him out. I think he is probably going to knock him out, but if he doesn't, then I do think over a 3-round decision that Sumudaerji is going to, he's just going to be comfortable, in my opinion. I like Matt Schnell. I think he's a good fighter. But like I said, I think Sumudaerji, there's something special about this guy. And I just don't think Matt Schnell's the guy to beat him right now. So for that reason, I'm picking Sumudaerji to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain. And this is going to be absolute fireworks. I think it's going to be an explosive fight. Before I looked into the tape, my analysis, my research, I did think that Charles Jourdain was very live in this spot, but after reviewing the tape, I do think that it's another good fight for Shane Burgos. I think Shane Burgos, he's going to be, well, he's definitely going to be the taller fighter. He's going to be the bigger fighter as well. He's an absolute unit for this division. And Charles Jourdain's not small, but I think he's going to be small compared to Shane Burgos. Now, when you go back and watch Burgos versus Quarantillo, you'll see that Burgos, you know, when things got a little bit too hectic striking and you wanted to slow things down, he was able to just get a body lock, double underhooks, and push Quarantillo against the cage and just use his physical strength just to take that time. And I think he's going to be able to do that against Jourdain. I think there's going to be a definite and obvious strength advantage in this fight, a physical advantage on the side of Shane Burgos. But then when you look at Shane Burgos, he's powerful, he throws volume, he comes forward hard, he'll eat shots to give shots. And he does have to be careful here because Charles Jourdain can crack. And we have seen Shane Burgos in a few bad situations in regards to knockouts and TKOs. So Shane Burgos, I don't think is as durable as what he was, say, 3 or 4 years ago. But I still think that he's definitely not. He's not washed in regards to having a glass chin or anything like that, because Quarantillo was cracking him with hard shots and Burgos at every single one of them. So I do think that Burgos has got to be careful, but outside of getting knocked out, which I think is a low percentage probability in this fight, I think Burgos is going to be able to come forward well. I think he's going to be able to land volume, hard shots. I don't think we're going to have to worry about factoring in any wrestling or any jiu-jitsu into this fight. Although a takedown or two might happen, it's MMA. You know, that's what we get. That's what we need to expect. I just don't think there's going to be significant enough action in any wrestling or BJJ department to be able to affect the fight. I think that it's going to be won and lost on the feet. And with Burgos being aggressive and powerful and physical, I just think it's going to be a problem for Charles Jourdain, who's probably going to be on the back foot more often than not. I definitely think he fights better on the front foot moving forwards. So yeah, I think it's a difficult fight for Jourdain. Not one that he can't win, but one that I think is going to be really difficult. So for that reason, I'm picking Shane Burgos to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is one that should have happened a couple of weeks ago. We've got Lauren Murphy versus Miesha Tate. And I think it's a good fight for Miesha Tate. The one thing, though, that does have to concern you from, you know, Tate's side is the fact that Lauren Murphy, again, you know, talking of physicality, it seems to be the theme of this episode of the podcast so far, but I think the physicality side is definitely on the side of Lauren Murphy. She's big and strong for the division. And the other thing that's concerning as well is Lauren Murphy's been in fights, 2 or 3 fights in the UFC where, in my opinion, she should have comfortably lost, but the judges have given her a decision for what reason, I'm not so sure. I'm not calling robbery on all of them, but some of them were, you know, very close. And that's a concern because Lauren Murphy's winning fights that she shouldn't be winning. And so there's something there. But outside of that, from a technical perspective, you've got Miesha Tate, who I believe is the better striker. We saw that against Ketlin Verheide. You know, Miesha Tate, I think, outlanded her in that fight, but she was looking okay. Even though Miesha Tate got beat, she was beaten by, you know, the more powerful striker. Tate's striking has come on so much, or looks to have come on so much, since she retired and quit MMA, and she's come back out of retirement. Her striking seems to be there, her wrestling's still there, topside grappling's still there, and this is where I think she's going to be a problem for Murphy. I don't think Murphy's going to be able to outstrike her. I think Miesha Tate's the better striker. I think Miesha Tate's the better wrestler. I think Miesha Tate's the better grappler, even though you've got to be careful with Murphy. She does have sneaky good dexterity in her legs. She can whip her legs up for Goga Pilates and rubber guard and attacks like that. So you've got to be careful. But outside of that, I think that Miesha Tate is better everywhere. I think she's more experienced. I think she's fought and beaten a better level of competition throughout her career. Still, since she's come back from her retirement, she's fought better competition than Lauren Murphy already. So yeah, all the signs point to Miesha Tate. A couple of concerns with, you know, the judges, should it go to a decision. And like I said, the physical advantages that Lauren Murphy is going to have could make it life a little bit harder for Tate, but I still think she's going to be able to overcome it. So I'm picking Miesha Tate to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Punahele Soriano versus Dalcha Lungiambula. And this is an interesting fight. I think it's going to be a close fight as well. I don't think Punahele Soriano is the prospect that a lot of people thought he was. I still think he's a good fighter, but I just don't think he's the fighter, like I said, that we thought he was. He's still got good qualities. He's still got decent power. He's still got decent striking. He's got that wrestling background, but when he takes his opponents down, he doesn't really do a great deal topside. So the topside BJJ could be improved. And the thing is with Dalcha Lungiambula, I don't think he's like this amazing world-class fighter himself. You know, obviously he's UFC level, so I suppose you should be classing him as world class. I think it's a little disrespectful to say otherwise, actually. So if you're watching Dalcha, I apologise, but I just don't think that he's up there with, you know, the top of the division, shall we say, the ranked opponents. But I do think he's got good qualities. He's a physical specimen. He's strong. He's absolutely ripped. He's huge. He's a unit. So he's going to have physical advantages in this fight. When it comes to the striking, he's probably going to be a step behind in regards to the speed, but he's got power and aggressiveness to sort of make up for that. And then is Soriano going to be able to take him down? Maybe, but it's going to be difficult with how strong and heavy Lungiambula will be, and he should be able to pop right back up to his feet anyway, because I don't think Punahele Soriano's got that topside BJJ strong enough or heavy enough to be able to keep Lungiambula down. And I just think it's going to be a true mixed martial arts fight, this. I think we're going to see a lot of striking. I think we're going to see wrestling and jiu-jitsu as well. And I'm not quite sure where the fight's going to be won and lost. I would edge towards the striking. But because of that, I'm actually going to side with the underdog here, because I think Lungiambula is going to be able to eat the punches that Soriano throws, and I think he's going to be able to throw back. I don't think Soriano's got that aggressive nature enough to be able to push somebody like Lungiambula back. And a good example of that is Marc-Andre Barrios. He was able to push Lungiambula back, and he was durable enough and tough enough to be able to eat the shots and push Lungiambula backwards. But I don't think that Soriano is going to be able to have that sort of effectiveness as what somebody like Barrios had. That's going to mean that Dalcha Lungiambula is going to be in the fight. I think it's going to be a close decision, so I'm going to sit on the side of the underdog. I'm picking Dalcha Lungiambula to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is one of the most intriguing fights on the entire card, in my opinion. You've got Ricky Simón versus Jack Shaw. Now, I know it appears that, and it doesn't appear, I do pick against Jack Shaw in pretty much every fight, and that's because I feel that there is still a big test for him at some point in the UFC. I like Jack Shaw. I think he's definitely got good values. You know, they call him the Welsh GSP. And like I said, he's a very good fighter, and he's a very tricky fighter to beat. So even if he loses a fight, which in my opinion, once he starts hitting the top level of the UFC, he will start to lose a couple of fights. But I don't think he's ever going to be out of a fight. Like, he's a good fighter. But with somebody like Ricky Simón, I think this is another test for him, because Ricky Simón is that type of wrestler that will shoot 8, 9, 10 takedowns in a fight, doesn't have great BJJ, topside BJJ, sorry. So his opponents will always likely get back up to the feet with relative ease, but it's that relentless wrestling pressure, the pace, the cardio that Simón's got. He's a nightmare to beat. Before you even try and implement your own game plan, you've just got to be able to stop Ricky Simón. And that's the reason why he's effective in what he does, and that's the reason why he hasn't been beaten many times, because you've got to be able to deal with him first before you can start applying your own game, and that's where it becomes difficult. And I think that Jack Shaw's going to have that difficulty to deal with, and I'm not sure he does overcome it, because his striking is going to be better than Ricky Simone's, in my opinion, although we have seen Ricky Simone stand and strike with a guy like Rob Font, who in my opinion is the best boxer in the division. So because Ricky Simone has been able to stand with Font, I do think Jack Shaw's going to have the slight edge on the striking, but I don't think it's going to be a big one. But this fight's going to be won and lost depending on how effective Ricky Simone is. If his wrestling is getting off the mark, if he is taking Jack Shaw down constantly, Shaw's not going to be able to get in any sort of flow state. His striking's going to be out of rhythm. He's going to struggle to put anything together in regards to coming forward himself, landing takedowns and getting his topside BJJ going. Because when you watch Jack Shaw fights, most of his wins, pretty much all of his wins, have come because he's been able to control his opponents on the mat. I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think Ricky Simone's going to be the better wrestler. He's going to be the better scrambler. I think he's going to cause a lot of problems in that aspect. So I think that Jack Shaw, it's not going to be a whitewash. It's definitely not. Jack Shaw's a good fighter, but I just think it's going to be a difficult one for Jack Shaw just because of the amount of takedowns he's going to have to deal with. He's not going to be able to really step into this fight, stamp his feet on the ground and just really push his game on Ricky Simone. I think it's going to be really difficult for him to do that because of the way Simone fights. It's going to be a close fight, definitely a close fight, because like I said, the BJJ side, when Jack Shaw's on the mat, he's going to have the better BJJ. The striking is probably going to have a slight edging, but like these guys, like Ricky Simone, he hasn't just taken 8-9 takedowns in a fight against, the bottom level of the UFC. He's been doing this for years against good opponents. He's been striking against the best opponents as well in the division. Like I've said with Rob Font, he's just a good all-round fighter with a relentless pressure, relentless pace, high volume with takedowns. So for that reason, I'm picking Ricky Simone to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got an interesting one because this fight was only put together a couple of days ago. There was supposed to be another 2 fights on this card. It was Bill Algeo and Herbert Burns that both lost their opponents. Luckily enough, they're both in a division where they can fight each other. So we've got Bill Algeo versus Herbert Burns, and it's going to be an interesting fight because they haven't been preparing for each other. Herbert Burns was preparing for a Russian, and Bill Algeo was preparing for Billy Quarantillo, who had insane pace and cardio. So both have got different opponents. I think that though with Herbert Burns, if he can get this fight to the mat, he's going to have success. Herbert Burns' BJJ is world class. Even his brother Gilbert will tell you that Herbert's got the better jiu-jitsu, which is, props to Gilbert for, saying that a while back. But I think outside of that, Bill Algeo is going to be a much more difficult fight to beat. Just like I've said with Ricky Simone, obviously Algeo hasn't got that relentless wrestling pressure or anything like that, but he's just a tricky fighter, weird striker, takes weird angles, fights in a weird way, switch stances weirdly. Everything's just unorthodox, I think is the right word to say with Bill Algeo, and I'm not sure Herbert Burns is going to be able to get those reads he needs on him to be able to really implement his game plan solidly. So if Herbert Burns does take him down, I think he could potentially find a submission, but I think he needs that submission within the first takedown. If Bill Algeo just stands right back up, Algeo grows into fights really well, and the longer the fight goes, the better it seems that he gets. So I think if Herbert Burns can't get Algeo out of there in round 1, it's going to be very tough for Herbert Burns to win this fight. And I never like to side with that type of fighter that needs a round 1 finish. So I am going to be siding with Bill Algeo, who I do believe is going to rack up volume. He's going to put pace, pressure on Herbert Burns, potentially tire out Herbert Burns as well. I think he's going to be able to weather a storm from Burns early on, because Bill Algeo is a black belt in BJJ. He's not the level of Burns, but it's probably enough. I think it's enough to be able to stay safe on the mat, get back up to his feet and just continue striking and moving and exiting and angling and doing all that unorthodox stuff he does. So I think it's going to be a difficult fight for Burns out of the first round. I don't think he's going to get that first round finish. So I am siding and picking Bill Algeo to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Dustin Jacoby versus Darren Jung. And again, I think this is a fight that's going to be won and lost on the feet. I think it's going to be an interesting one. Both fighters are strikers, and like I said earlier on with Muslim Salikhov and Li Jingliang, I just feel that the fighter with the kickboxing background is always the fighter to be favoured in a fight that's more or less going to be won and lost on the feet, which again sort of describes this fight as well, because Dustin Jacoby's got that kickboxing background. You can see he's just got that little bit of edge when he fights his opponents. you can see that striking background coming through, and he does have that edge over his opponents in the striking department. Now, with Darren Jung, he's got to be careful because Darren Jung comes with a ton of power. We saw what he did in his last fight against Kennedy and Zechikwu. And like I said, he's definitely got power enough to be able to get knockouts in his fights. Dustin Jacoby hasn't really shown durability issues. So again, I feel like although Darren Jung's got power, Jacoby does need to be careful. But again, I don't think it's an outcome that happens more often than it doesn't, if that makes sense. And I think that Dustin Jacoby is just going to be able to come into this fight. Hopefully he's injury-free from his perspective, because in his last fight against Miesha Oleksiejczuk, he injured both his knees, he struggled with his cardio, he wasn't able to kick. And that's something I think, I know I picked up on it within the first minute of that fight. I know the commentators did as well. But the fact he wasn't throwing kicks definitely was a sign that something wasn't right. And he still went out there and beat Miesha Oleksiejczuk, who I think is a better fighter than Darren Jung. Remember Darren Jung not long ago drawing with a Sam Alvey that hasn't won in around 7 or 8 fights. So I think that Dustin Jacoby is definitely going to have moments in this fight where he's defensive and he's having to worry about the power. But outside of that, his kickboxing background, his volume, the ability to mix things up, his varied attacks on the feet as well is going to pull him through a fight that is likely going to be won and lost on the feet. So I'm picking Dustin Jacoby to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Dwight Grant versus Dustin Stoltzfus. And I think that this is going to be a striker versus grappler type of fight. Not that Dustin Stoltzfus doesn't have any striking about him, he definitely does. But the thing is with Dwight Grant, he is a very athletic and powerful striker himself. So I think that Stoltzfus is going to be cautious enough to be able to just go in there, look for takedowns. He did that against Gerald Miesha. And actually, Dustin Stoltzfus was winning that fight quite comfortably against Miesha on the mat. And because he was doing so well on the mat against Miesha, he's definitely going to have advantages over Dwight Grant on the mat. Not that Dwight Grant isn't a good grappler, but he's just not Gerald Miesha. And the fact that Stoltzfus was completely nullifying Miesha tells me that Stoltzfus is a decent topside grappler. I think that's where his advantages are in this fight. If Dwight Grant really does start teeing off on Stoltzfus, I think it's almost just going to make Stoltzfus look for that be more urgent with that wrestling and trying to get the topside grappling going. So I think that Dwight Grant has definitely got to keep this fight on his feet. Dwight Grant has got good takedown defense as well, so it's not going to be massively easy for Stoltzfus. It's really going to be a close fight in my opinion, because Dwight Grant's going to have moments in this fight where he's going to be looking dangerous, but then Stoltzfus, I think, is going to be able to get takedowns. He is going to be able to, put enough takedowns together, shoot enough to be able to get 1 or 2 of them in a round or 2. And I think he only needs to have a decent amount of top control in 2 rounds out of the 3 to be able to take the win. And I think that's ultimately the way I'm siding here, because although I do like Dwight Grant's game, although he has got power, I think that Stoltzfus is going to be able to implement his game plan throughout this fight. And because I do see a bigger advantage in that grappling than I do in the striking, I'm going to be picking Dustin Stoltzfus to win this fight. In the final breakdown of this episode, we've got Jessica Penne versus Emily Ducote. And I think this is an interesting fight. Newcomer Emily Ducote is going to be the shorter fighter here. It's quite deceptive, really, because she looks quite a big unit inside the cage. She looks very big, but Penne is going to be taller. That's what the stats are telling you. She's going to be longer as well. I think that Jessica Penne has got by on being able to wrestle, though, get topside grappling since she had that comeback from all that mix-up with USADA, I think it was. But Jessica Penne's not been looking too bad. I mean, she beat Lupi Godinez, which Lupi Godinez is on a tear at the minute. So again, though, Penne did that by grinding and being able to get a grappling going. I think in a fight where Penne is going to be fighting somebody an aggressive striker that's coming forwards, looking to land on her, and a fighter that could potentially stifle that wrestling and grappling side of Penne, I think she's going to really struggle. And to be honest with you, the reason why I've just explained it like that is because that is Emily Ducote from what I've seen. She's a Muay Thai-based striker. She's slow, plodding, forward-moving, stalking, reactive counter striker, all these things that is typical of a Muay Thai type of fighter, and Ducote does have that style. I think Ducote is going to be able to wait for Penne to come in, and Penne is going to have to be the one coming forwards rather than the one reacting. And I think that's where Penne really gets some of these fighters, because she does a good job of countering their aggression. But Ducote is going to be aggressive, but she's not going to be putting that fast pace on. enough for Penne to really take advantage of her overexerting or overextending or doing a little bit too much. I think Ducote is just going to have a good fight here. I think she's going to be able to pick Jessica Penne apart. She's definitely going to have to deal with some defensive wrestling. She's definitely going to have to get back up to her feet once or twice, in my opinion. But I think she's good enough to be able to do that. I don't think Penne is going to be able to absolutely run through her on the mat. And I think that Ducote is going to do a lot of good work on the feet. I think she's going to put a lot of powerful strikes together, counter really well, lead really well. And I think that even though there's going to be wrestling and grappling moments, I think the edge is going to be in the striking department. And that's where I see Emily Ducote being the better fighter. So I'm picking Emily Ducote to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast for UFC Long Island on Saturday night. As always, I appreciate the support, the likes to the video, the subscriptions to the MMA Play 365 YouTube channel as well. I comment in the replies, so drop a comment, tell me who you're betting on, tell me where you disagree with my picks. We can have a conversation, we can have a chat. If you are betting on Saturday night, then I hope you smash the bookies, cash the tickets. I'm Newsome, thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.